Welcome to Unplanned and Untold, a podcast that dives into the real-life, unexpected twists of facing an unplanned pregnancy in college. Join us as we listen to the unplanned and untold stories of those who have overcome the odds in order to achieve their goals. Welcome to another episode of Unplanned and Untold. I'm your host, Caitlin Willing, and today we have one of my special friends, Audrey Cross. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, so excited.
I'm so excited. Audrey and I go way back, but when I was prepping for this podcast, I was like, what are some of my first memories with Audrey? And some of them go back to your wedding day, actually, taking pictures for your, do you remember that?
So long ago. So exciting.
That is gosh. Isn't that wild? Was it your, wild. Wait, it wasn't your wedding. Was it your sister's wedding? It was your sister's wedding.
That was not too long after ours.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So how many years ago was that?
Ooh, let's see. I don't even know what year that was. We got married in 2014.
Okay, so around then, 2014. Yeah. That is crazy. Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, I am super excited to dive into your story because you have a lot of twists and turns to, you know, what happened in your unplanned pregnancy. So take me back to where you were born and raised and what high school looked like for you.
So that's a kind of complicated question. I moved around a whole lot. So born in Mississippi, I've lived in Colorado, New Mexico, Northern Alabama, back to New Mexico.
Wow.
My whole family's from like this Auburn area though.
Okay.
So like this is like home. Like this is the home hub for my family. Yes.
So sweet. So sweet. And so did you go to high school in Auburn?
So I went to high school in New Mexico. That's actually where I met my husband.
Okay.
And yes, so we met out there.
Okay. That makes sense. So you end up finding out that you are pregnant when you are a freshman in college?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I was a freshman. He's younger though. So he was a senior in high school when we found out.
So he was still in high school and I can't even imagine. Now that's a hard one to tell parents because you're kind of like learning to fly the coop, but yet he's still fully dependent on his parents.
Yes, it was. Yes, that was an adventure telling parents. Well, and his mom had him when he was 19.
Wow.
So his one like rule was do not get a girl pregnant at 19. Oh. So here I am at 19 pregnant.
So take me back. What even made you think, okay, I could possibly be pregnant?
So I was very like my cycle's never normal.
Right.
And so we didn't find out until I was 9 weeks and 4 days.
Wow.
So I just remember like there was never any thought of like, oh my gosh, I could be.
Right.
You know, there was never that question. I just remember being nauseous one day, and then it hit me and I didn't even question it. I remember looking at him and I said, I'm pregnant. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I don't know, but I'm pregnant. And he's like, there was no reason for me to think it either. And
you just knew.
I just knew. And sure enough, I was pregnant.
Oh my gosh. So did you guys take the pregnancy test together? What did that look like?
Yes. He left and went and got one. And then we took it together. And yes, it was a mess because we took it and then he had to leave and go to work like in 30 minutes. And so we literally had like 15 minutes to digest it. We found out in February. So like the end of his senior year, we're like coming to the end of it.
Okay.
And I'm like, hey, let's add this to your plate.
Why not? Right? Why not? So you're a freshman. What were you studying at the time?
So I wanted to do law. I was just doing basics and then a few like pre-law courses.
Okay. And what were you thinking when you actually found out you were pregnant? I mean, what did you think school went out the window? What was your thought process on finishing?
Just surviving, telling parents and figuring it out from there. Like I didn't really, I didn't think school was out the window at that point. Like at that point, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I have to quit. It was later that kind of came into play, but it was not, that wasn't even a thought at the beginning. It was just like, oh my gosh, let's survive telling our parents. Cause I grew up very like, it was a scandal in my family. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Did you grow up in the church?
Yes. Yes.
Those sometimes are the hardest stories to tell because there is this pressure to live up to a certain standard, and we all make mistakes. And sometimes that is a very scary thing to admit when you're, a teenager still. And that's such a big one because it affects their lives too. And it's kind of like a domino effect for the whole family.
Yeah. And my parents had gotten divorced a year ago, like almost a year ago. It hadn't even been a full year.
Wow.
And so it was trying to figure, all that out. It was just,
So who did you tell first, mom or dad, or did you do it together?
So we were going to go see my mom for spring break the next month. We plan on telling her in person because my mom had just moved back to Alabama.
Okay.
So she had just moved back. I'm currently living with dad out in New Mexico. And we plan on telling mom in person, but I found out the ultrasound would ping on insurance and I was still on mom's insurance.
Oh.
So yeah. So that was a really like that phone call. I called her and I called her because the ultrasound was like coming up like that day. And so
that day you waited till like
the day that I called her. Listen, I was like,
it's time.
Wait and make sure there's even a baby alive.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yes.
We put everyone through this.
Yep. 100%.
So, I called her that day and she was at school and I said, hey, I need to like, are you sitting down? And it was like, she knew too. Like, it was crazy how it happened. She was like, why? And I said, are you sitting down? And she's like, why? And I said, well, I have news. And she said, you're pregnant. And it was not something that would have been expected from me.
Right.
And so it was just crazy how like she knew and she instantly was like, okay, we're going to be okay. Like, it's okay. Like you're going to be okay. So yeah, that's how mom found out.
And what a difference to what you probably were building up in your mind, how your mom was going to react. Right.
Yeah, I was definitely, I was nervous to tell mom. I was a little bit more nervous to tell dad.
Okay.
And tell his family. That one was,
How did he react? How did you even tell him?
Well, as 19 and 18-year-olds with a strict dad, I'm like, oh, he's going to hit him. Like, he's going to hit him.
He's going to beat him up. Poor PJ. PJ probably was like shaking in his boots for your dad to know.
Oh my God, it was terrible. So actually, like, we told my brother the night before because my brother, my younger brother was in PJ's same like age. Like he skipped a grade. So he's in PJ's grade. He's best friends with PJ.
Oh my God.
And so we tell my brother the night before and we're like, okay, well, we went to the ultrasound and we have to tell dad. And he was like, well, I'm going to be there. I was like, well, yeah. So we're sitting like, it's like my dad and then in a chair and then on a couch, it's me closest to my dad and then my brother and then PJ is far away.
You set it up like all these intervention pieces so dad could not go straight for him.
So bad. Like it was not funny, but looking back, it's so funny. And then we told him the ultrasound and he's like, what is this? And
what is it?
Well, I'm pregnant. He's like, this is a joke. And he was just like, this is a joke. This is a joke. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, that was just kind of like, oh my God, it's not a joke. We thought instantly like we would be kicked out. So we're like looking and like, we have no money. I mean, are you kidding me? He's like, no
teenagers.
Money. Yes. So we're looking, I'll never forget. We even like are looking up on like Zillow and we found like a shack we could stay.
We can do this, babe. We can make it. You were ready. I just love that y'all were like preparing for that though.
Yes. So dad finds out, dad leaves for a couple hours and we're all sitting there like, okay, well, he has left the building. Like, what happens now? And no, it was really awesome because he comes back and we don't talk that night because it's late by the time he comes back. And so the next morning, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to go downstairs and see him. Like, I know he's
Right.
home. I don't want to see
Right.
him. And he was just very like awesome about it. He was like,
Wow.
it's gonna be okay. He said, have you told PJ's family? And we're like, no. And he's like, well, if PJ gets kicked out, he can, we'll figure it out. He has room here. And so
Oh,
he pretty much was like, if he gets kicked out, he can stay in Courtney's room. And so
wow.
it was just like, we thought that my husband was gonna get beat up. And then here my dad is like
Embracing him.
like, yeah, I'm not thrilled about the situation,
Right.
but I mean, here it is.
Not as
So
bad as we kind of build it up to
yeah,
be sometimes.
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Wow. So tell me the journey with school. What did that look like for you? I know you said you were feeling super sick. Did that continue?
I was so sick.
Okay.
So I made it a little bit further in that semester. And then at some point I just like, I couldn't go back. And so
Right.
I just dropped out. And I mean, I was sick, 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 sick,
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just, I'm also like, we're not telling people yet, like
Right.
besides our families. So I'm not like, I didn't have any other friends who were like close to me who were still
Sure.
in that town who stayed at that community college. So it wasn't like
Right.
I could be like, hey, can you help me? Can I get notes? Like
Yes.
I would like literally had no options at that
Right.
point. And
Mm.
so I stopped going like at the end of that semester. I couldn't even finish it, which was
Right.
crazy, like terrible.
But without the proper support, it's so
Yeah,
hard. It's extremely hard.
for sure.
And we hear that story more often than not. And I think
Hmm.
that is a big driving force. Stories like yours is a big driving force to get baby steps on every campus to really be
Yes.
that built-in safety net for these student moms and let them know that
Hmm.
if they want to continue, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that's possible. And so
Hmm.
if you fast forward a little bit to when baby Brody's born, what does that all look like for you?
So by then we had moved to Alabama because then
Okay.
I told PJ very upfront, like, I have a huge family. Like, we have
Mm-hmm.
a big support system. Your family is not huge. I
Right.
also want to raise, this baby somewhere else. And so he supported that. We moved across the country. When Brody was born, PJ was he played football and was going to a school in Montgomery. And
Wow.
so he would come home on weekends. Um, and so Brody was born immediately, like struggles kind of hit.
Okay.
Um, I mean, from like the labor and delivery room. I mean, he was like rushed back, didn't have great oxygen. So we didn't see him for several hours.
Wow.
Um, then we finally get to see him. We finally get to hold him. And then like issues kind of started, like fluke random things like
Okay.
um his procedure in the hospital didn't take. That was like an adventure. And then we find out in his first week, okay, he has a murmur. We got to get that figured out. And, like
Mm.
when you hear like heart murmur and you're 19 years old and you don't know anything about
No.
anything, you just panic, like
Terrified.
something's wrong with my baby's heart,
Sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, it was just a very difficult first year. So he, within a few months, started having seizure-like episodes that would last multiple hours at night, and you couldn't like snap him out of it. And it was every night, and it was just absolutely horrific. So, like, we started getting him, seen by several doctors at Children's
Mm.
Hospital to just try to kind of figure that out. And then we noticed, so like we have his heart that's being monitored. We have a procedure that we know we have to get fixed. We have now seizures that are lasting. And by PJ's, Brody was born in September. After that first semester of his freshman year,
Right.
he took a semester off
Right. It was a
because this
lot.
was no, it was just too much. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was too much. So he took a semester off. And so within that first year, I mean, we had health issue after health issue. And then we noticed he's not making like normal milestones, right?
Okay.
And his doctor is like,
What's going on
so
here? Yeah.
yeah. So um we find out first off, his vision's a little off. And can you even imagine like an 8-month-old in glasses? Do you remember how little
he was so cute though? They're truly the cutest when they have those little like flexible glasses that like tie, like wrap in the back.
With the band. Yes.
Oh my God.
So cute. So, I mean, it was just thing after thing. And then we realize he's not making these milestones. So we go to a geneticist.
Okay.
Because it's just too many like things that are off. And we're so blessed with like the world's best pediatrician who like fought for us and like listened to everything that we, our concerns. And so we see a geneticist, and then they call me back about 2 weeks later and they say, hey, we need you to come to the office tomorrow. Wow. And I'm like, okay. So we go back to the office, and at that point, his syndrome is still pretty like not very well known.
Okay.
And so they come into the room with this huge like folder of papers, and they said, okay, well, your son has what's called Potocki-Lupski syndrome. We don't know much about it, but here is everything that we could find on the internet. They like hand it to me, and they basically are like, you're going to have to join a support group. And we're like,
wow, like what the heck? Your world just got turned upside down at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, they immediately plug us in to AIDB, and he's getting early intervention. Like, I mean, it was a whirlwind. So it started with like, what? And then it's like, now all of a sudden we have all these therapists and we have all these appointments, and, we have surgeries, and I mean, it kind of like his health took over completely. Like, and it was just crazy. It was a whirlwind. And by that point, I mean, PJ's 19 and I'm 20 at that point. And so
babies.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think it was just hard to like realize that everything that like we had envisioned for our future and for his future is now going to look a little different. And I think realizing that at such a young age was just, that was kind of difficult too. Like the mourning of like what you thought your life was going to look like.
Absolutely.
Type situation.
You got a second curveball. I mean, it's hard enough to have an unplanned pregnancy and to realize your life's changing, but then to have a child with special needs on top of that, and some pretty severe special needs where you are full time into doctor's appointments and therapy and figuring things out so that he's the best value of life possible. I can't even imagine, to be completely honest. And you did it like a champ, girl, because I watched from afar and I just could not believe that you were handling it the way that you were. I mean, you really were always very, very positive, and you still are. And you're an open book to share your story, to give these other moms who may be struggling with a child with special needs some encouragement and hope that life's okay. And you take it one step at a time. And y'all have done that. So PJ still wanted to go to college though. So you were kind of attending to Brody's needs. PJ still wanting to go to college. Does he go back after that semester that he took off?
I think he ended up, it's such a whirlwind back then. I think he ended up taking another semester off. So I think he took a full year. Like, I think he was out for a full year.
Right.
Which was huge. I mean, in that time, Brody had his first several surgeries, long hospital stays. I mean, it was just, and he was working like 3 jobs.
Oh my goodness.
So yes. So I think he took a full year, and then he was like, we can't, like, he knew that like we can't keep doing what we're doing, like you have to go to school to get a degree. And so it's really cool. I think he never had medical field on his radar until several of Brody's like hospital visits. And then he's like looking around and he's like, okay, like, I think I would love to do this.
Wow. Yeah. So it really inspired him. So when he goes back to school, what does he start studying? What does he want to do?
So he goes back and does like his basics and gets his LPN. Okay. And then immediately is like, no, we're going to keep going, and gets his like bachelor's in nursing.
Wow. Yeah. And when does marriage enter into the picture for the both of you?
So we got married, which that in itself is a funny story, but we got married when Brody was like 1.5. Things had finally calmed down a little bit. And so, yes, like Brody, around 1.5 for Brody. Yeah.
Okay. And that's wild. So your family at that point, they're all on board. And what kind of support system did you have with all of these, medical needs that Brody had?
So, I mean, my sister is Brody's like number one. Like they have a super close relationship. So when we moved to Alabama, it was definitely what was needed. And I'm glad like the Lord pushed us here because we would have never gotten the same healthcare and support system there. We just have like bigger here, And so my sister is super close. My mom, like we just had, those key people. And then my dad ended up several years later, moving here. So we have him who lives 10 minutes from me. And so, I mean, the support system really came from like those key family members. And then also like, grandparents were helpful, but then like I got involved in church and like really made some friends there, which was really, really good. Mm-hmm.
That is really awesome. And at some point you get pregnant again. How old were you when you got pregnant the second time?
So that was something, it's funny how Brody, like, we never expected, number one. I didn't know for sure I could have kids. I'd already had surgery on my ovaries.
Wow.
So we get pregnant with Brody while I'm on birth control, mind you. And so we try for another baby because we know that like he's going to do better with a sibling because he's nonverbal. I mean, he's nonverbal till he's 4.5. And then by 5, he knows 10 words, goodness. And so we knew that if we had another baby, when we were a little bit more, financially stable, that he would grow with baby number 2.
Yeah.
So my husband is in nursing school. He works full time on the psych ward at the hospital so he could study at night when the patients go to sleep.
Oh my God.
He works night shift. And so he's like gone all the time. And in his second or third semester of nursing school, we birthed our twins.
So as if life wasn't as complicated as it was, the humor in all of this is, of course, the second time you get pregnant, it's not 1, but it's 2.
Yes. We got a little BOGO there. So.
Oh my gosh. I really will never forget. And I don't even know if we were super close at the time, but I will never forget your gender reveal and those big balloons. Isn't this not crazy? Like you posted it on Facebook and I was just so invested at this point. I was just like, I just couldn't believe you're then going to have twins and popping those 2 pink balloons. I just was over the moon for you to have girls, but that was such an exciting moment.
I had always wanted a daughter and I was so scared they were going to be twin boys, which we would have loved. Yeah. But I wanted a girl so bad. I mean, so like, I mean, just elated. And I feel like at that point, a lot of people are invested because everybody knows Brody. I mean, everybody knows Brody and all the stuff he's endured. I mean, he has a Facebook group and like, everyone rallies around our family for Brody. So everyone's invested in
Yes, we were. And here you are, twin girls. And I just love their pictures are behind you. You have some of their pictures up and they're just the sweetest, the absolute sweetest little family. And to watch him interact with his sisters, oh my gosh, it's just the sweetest thing in the entire world.
It's precious. I mean, they're all so sweet. And the girls are like the best. I mean, such a gift from God. And Brody, I mean, through them starting to talk and do all the things, I mean, he's like really, really turned around and like, we've been blessed with some amazing people in our lives who are like able to rally and like really help with all of that. And he's blossomed through watching them grow for sure.
That is awesome.
It's been really cool.
Really awesome. And another little special tidbit that I'll share with our listeners is you actually volunteer your time to photograph our student moms, and especially their beautiful graduation pictures are my absolute favorite with their littles. And thank you so much for doing that. And I know when I had reached out initially, I wasn't expecting the full response that I got back from you. I was sure you were going to say yes. At that part, I'm like, she's probably going to say yes, but she's so busy. She's twins and a child child that needs extra care. And when you said yes and you gave me your reasoning, I literally cried because it brought me back to a moment as a young mom with an unplanned pregnancy. So I would love for you to kind of share with our listeners why you decided to volunteer your time and take pictures of our student moms.
Well, I don't even remember exactly what I told you, but I just know that taking pictures is such a passion for me, but being able to give back to people who, I know I could never afford pictures back then. I know that would have never been even on my radar. So Audrey picks up a camera and learns how to do it herself, and just giving those moms something that they wouldn't be able to do on their own, or just loving on them that way is my way that I can give back. Just making them feel special and their babies feel special. And it's that's a time that should feel exciting and amazing. And I think sometimes I don't even know how to put it. I just want them to feel celebrated in that way.
That is exactly what you told me. And it literally brought me back to the same thing. I mean, I think the very first time we met, and correct me if I'm wrong, was you taking Hudson's, was it Hudson or Croy's maybe, newborn pictures, back when you first started photography. You lived off Wire Road, and we put them in, a bucket in the middle of, it was Croy, a bucket in the middle of a cotton field.
Yes. Look, we all start somewhere.
But even at that point with my second baby, I didn't have any money, even with the second one being so young. But with Hudson, I have one set of professional, super good pictures of him, or people gifted me sessions, but you want those milestones and you want those professional pictures, and you just can't afford them. And it's one of the things that gets cut out when you're a young mom. And it's such a gift. You are such a gift to our student moms to really capture those memories in such a professional, beautiful way for them to cherish forever. And so we really appreciate all you do for them.
No, I love it. I love it. And the girls there are always so sweet and so gracious, and they're all so sweet. So no, I love it. I love doing it. Absolutely. Oh, well, it's worth it for sure.
Yes. And if you are listening and you want to see some of our graduation photos of our student moms, you can head over to our Instagram account. They're just flooded all over the place. And I've got one last question for you. If you could tell a student mom who just found out she was pregnant, let's say maybe there's a girl who's listening, what advice would you give her as she's looking down at that positive pregnancy test?
I would say, I'm going to try not to cry. I would say that you can do hard things. That positive test is so emotional, Taylor.
It's okay. I get this place too. It's yes.
That positive is not, the end of your life or the end of your future or the end of your dreams. And you can find people who will support you. I think it's so important. And I think your drive to put it on every single campus is huge. I think it would have made such a difference, in my life had it been around back then. But I would just say you can do hard things. You're not alone. You'll find your community. Your community is there. They need you. They're waiting on you. And what is so scary is probably going to end up being the best blessing and the biggest blessing in your whole life, because that's, how it was for me. And I think, you as well, and so, that positive test just ended up bringing so much purpose and blessings into your life, just like me. So
absolutely.
Something like that is what I would say.
Because in that moment, all you see is the negative and the panic and the fear that takes over. And hopefully through listening to stories like yours and other brave women on this podcast, they can see you live a beautiful life now, Audrey. And in that moment, I don't think that 18, 19-year-old girl could have ever thought that this is what your life was going to look like and that it wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. And so we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us and for taking the time to be an inspiration to other young women.
Absolutely. It's my honor and pleasure. And I just appreciate you having me on. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, thank you again to our listeners. We hope to have you back in about 2 weeks for another episode of Unplanned and Untold. Bye-bye. Do you want to be a part of an organization that is the first of its kind to empower student moms? Your support can impact generations to come. Consider making a financial contribution at babysteps.org.